So Dr. King came to Huntsville in 1962. Dr. King was my father. There were a few dozen people who met Dr. King at the airport, and I was at the old airport down on Airport Road. And like I said, they were all there to greet him, and they asked Dr. King who he wanted to ride with. Well, he looked out in the parking lot and he saw a convertible Cadillac. He said, I want to ride in that car. Well, that was my father's car, so my father had the privilege of escorting him around to his speaking engagements and different things here in Huntsville. Now another thing, there was one hotel in Huntsville that a black person could stay at that time. It was the Gladys Jane Hotel, and it was near the corner of University and Pulaski Pike. And when Dr. King came here, he didn't stay at that hotel. And for a long time I wondered, well, why didn't he just stay at the Gladys Jane? And then one day somebody in the audience said, well, you know, that might have been where the Klan or whoever would be looking for him. At the Gladys Jane Hotel. So he didn't stay there. He stayed at the home of Reverend Ezekiel Bell, who I showed you his blurry picture earlier. He stayed there, was kept quiet, of course, but he stayed at Reverend Bell's house. Now, black people back in those days, a lot of them were hunters. So they had guns, they had long guns, they had rifles and shotguns. And so they had a pretty good group of men who stood guard throughout the night at that place. Because, you know, we didn't know the word might get out where Dr. King was staying here in town. And we didn't want to have any trouble. So. Okay. So many years later, I had a chance to talk with Reverend Bell about that. He had actually, I think he was from Memphis, and he had come here, but he had gone back to Memphis. But he came here to be honored. And I got to ask him kind of one of those reporter-like questions. I said, so tell me something about that other people don't know. You know, like a reporter might ask. And he said, well, we kept it quiet. He said, we didn't have any trouble. But he said, if there had been any trouble, we were ready. That's what he told me about housing Dr. King for, I think he was here for a couple of nights or something like that. But he said, if there had been any trouble, we were ready. But Dr. King talked about integrating the schools. He talked about nonviolence, and he talked about voter registration when he was here. He saw those as the important things. And I suspect that as far as integrating the schools, he understood that if you can get children together at a young age, you know, before they've been taught some of that bigotry, that it's a lot easier than after they're in high school or once they're young adults. It's a lot easier if you can do that. And then I think the other thing, nonviolence is obvious because if property were getting destroyed or people were getting hurt, then it's not going to even matter who's right and who's wrong, right? And of course, voter registration, that's a way to help to get things to change. But see, back then, in order to register to vote, first of all, you had to have someone who was already registered go with you to vouch for you, okay? In order for you to register to vote, to vouch for you, all right? And then the other thing is that the examiner would give you a piece of a portion of the U.S. Constitution, and you had to interpret that to his satisfaction. So you can see why a lot of people didn't even bother to try to register to vote. And you know, if you were well connected, you didn't have any problem, you know. But a lot of people didn't even bother to try. But Dr. King stressed the importance of getting that done if we wanted to have change here in Huntsville. Okay, now earlier, is it Josh? Is that what's it? It was Matt. The other. Hey, Matt. Okay. He talked a little bit about Blue Jean Sunday. Well, this is a blurry photo being captured from the video of Blue Jean Sunday. Now, what that was an economic boycott. Okay, Easter Sunday in the black communities was at that time is a big deal, And usually women would buy very fancy dresses, and men would buy these expensive suits at Easter time. But what they did is they kept this quiet, but they decided they weren't going to buy those fancy suits or those fancy dresses. They kept it completely quiet. So they let the merchants go ahead and stock up with all of this stuff. And then they didn't buy. What they did was the men wore blue jeans. And the ladies wore blue jeans. And the ladies who didn't want to wear pants bought or wore denim skirts. Bought or made denim skirts. And so that was our blue jean protest. And by the way, they didn't even buy those things here in Huntsville. They went out of town to buy those things to hurt the merchants even further. And that was a very effective boycott. Like I said, it took all of these things, a lot of things, the poster walks and all kinds of things like that to make some difference, to start to make some difference. Okay, so that's Blue Jean Sunday. Now, this, you probably can't read that completely, but about 3 years ago, I spoke at the Rotary Club, and there was a gentleman there, let's see. Oh, Sneed. Rankin Sneed is his name. And he's a semi-retired lawyer. He may be completely retired now. But he was chairing the meeting that I spoke at. And after I spoke, he presented me with a copy of this document. Well, Rankin's father, back in 1963, Rankin's father was chairman of the Huntsville Board of Education. And this is the subpoena that was presented to him. And this was telling the Huntsville School Board, come down here to federal court, bring this documentation with you, because you got some explaining to do. That's the way Rankin, when he presented it to me, that's what he said. So this was kind of the document that got it all started with the school integration. And so they had to go down there, and somebody, another place I was speaking, who knew someone who was part of the party that went down there, they said that the lawyers for the DOJ ate them up like catfish or something like that. You know, just tore them apart. The poor lawyers. But now, so here's the thing to remember. Now this was filed in 1963. Brown versus Board of Education was already 9 years old. So these lawyers didn't really have much to stand on. As I like to say, they were arguing uphill. You know, they didn't have much to stand on because Brown versus Board of Education had already struck down separate but equal, right? And so these lawyers for the Huntsville City School, they had a 4-point argument why I should not be allowed to go to Fifth Avenue School, which was about a block and a half from my house, from our house at that time. Number one, they said such a thing had never been done before. how flimsy is that? Number two, they said there was such a wide street that I'd have to cross to get to the school. Now they're talking about Governor's Drive. Yeah. Now, and I guess they were concerned for my safety. I don't know. But the judge asked him. He said, are there white children that have to cross that street? Yes. Are there crossing guards to help those children? Yes. Can't those same crossing guards help them to cross the street? You know. So they had lost that one. Their third point. They said, if we let this little Negro boy into our school, it'll disrupt the entire school system. And the way my dad described it, he said, the judge leaned forward, he said, you mean to tell me you have such poor control over your school system that this one little Negro boy could disrupt your entire school? You know, so they had lost that one. And then their fourth and final point, because like I said, they didn't have much, but they said that they had turned Montgomery upside down and could not find a copy of my birth certificate. Oh. So if you think the first time they tried that was on Barack Obama, you're wrong. They practiced on me decades earlier. They practiced on me with that one. Well, I think their lawyers were embarrassed when our lawyers explained that I was born in East Chicago, Indiana. They needed to be looking in Indianapolis. Okay, but that's the best they had. That's the best that a high-paid staff of lawyers had to try to keep me out of the school. Now, after the arguments, the judge did not even retire to deliberate. He ruled from the bench. He told them, Judge H.H. Grooms was his name, but he told them, he said, admit these four, because there were 3 other children in the lawsuit with me, admit these 4 immediately, and he said by January 1st, I want a plan on my desk for the desegregation of all Huntsville City and Madison County schools. Okay? So, now, I mentioned that there were 4 of us in all on the lawsuit. When the lawsuit was first filed, there were 27 black families who said they wanted their children to be part of this integration. But see, in the early 60s, if you were black in Alabama, you almost certainly worked for someone who was white. And they didn't necessarily see us as freedom fighters. They saw us as troublemakers. And so through threats and intimidation, We went down from 27 families down to 4, literally 4 families. By the time the judge's decision was issued, we were down to four families. Oh, and let me mention this about the families. My father was a doctor and had his own practice, so he couldn't really be intimidated. His job at least, right? One of the other young men, his father was a minister and had his own church. And the young lady in our group, there was one young lady out of the 4 of us, her mother was a beautician and owned her own beauty salon. So honestly, I believe that's a big reason why those, now the 4th young man, to be honest, I don't know what his parents did, but the three that I know about were all somewhat independent or immune to that pressure, that type of pressure. Now, that is 701 Clinton Avenue. That building is still there. Mm-hmm. In 1963, that was the home of the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Huntsville. And I have that picture there because the Unitarian Church was the only predominantly white church that supported the civil rights movement as a church. There were individuals from other churches, don't get me wrong, especially the Catholic Church, but there were individuals from other churches. But as a church, the Unitarians supported us and put some skin on it. So after the judge's decision, they had a little, kind of a little kindergarten. So back in those days, kindergarten was not required like it is today. But they had a little week-long kindergarten for the black children and several white children because they'd never gone to school together in Alabama. In the history of this state, black children and white children had never gone to school together. So the Unitarians hosted a little, some little week-long kindergarten type thing for us. Now, another little side story. About a year and a half ago, a young man from Channel 48 wanted to interview me, and we went to this place, and we were going to stand out front and do the interview. But the couple that owned the house came up, and we told them a little bit, and they invited us in. And so he got a chance to film inside there. And my father's video has some footage of 1963 and me running around in there, and a lot of it looks just the same today as it did back in 1963. The crown molding and the doorways and all look exactly the same as they did in 1963. But 701 Clinton. Oh, and by the way, that marquee out front says, "We are in mourning for the slain children of Birmingham." To give you an idea.
16th Street Church.
Right. And that was.
So the Unitarians. Now, does anybody know who that is?
Yeah.
Who? Go ahead. Go ahead. Do you know?
Sure.
Viola Liuzzo, or Liuzzo, I'm not sure how she pronounced it. But she was a homemaker in Detroit, and during the Selma times, she came down to help with the civil rights movement, to help shuttle some people to the airport and to Selma and things like that. And she was murdered by the Klan. She was shot by the Klan. And the reason that they caught the people who did it was because there was an FBI informant in the car with the Klan. And sometimes I thought, seems like maybe he could have stopped the shooting, And then it occurs to me that if he had stopped the shooting, that might have blown his cover, and he might have been shot also or strung up, But anyway, but she was murdered. She had 4 or 5 children, I forget, and came down to help. She saw some things on TV and came down to help with the effort and was murdered. But she was a Unitarian Universalist, and there are others as well who were committed to the cause. Sometimes I wonder, what were the white Christian churches doing during the movement? And the only thing I can figure is they were too busy singing and praying about brotherhood to actually be out, doing something.
Pressing women.
I'm sorry?
Or pressing women.
Pressing women.
Okay, and there's a photo that's been in the Huntsville Times. It's been on TV and stuff. And 95% of the people who see that think that's my father and me going to school. But that's actually us being turned away from school. Back in those days, school always started the Tuesday after Labor Day. And that particular year, Labor Day was September 2nd. So Tuesday, September 3rd, we were supposed to go. Well, the Honorable Governor George C. Wallace of the sovereign state of Alabama kept the schools closed. The schools that were going to integrate kept those schools closed. And so this was our first day, and us walking back home. And I know we're walking back home because that's looking west down Governor's Drive. And the school would have been behind us and kind of over that would have been to the left. And our home would have been forward and to the left a little bit. So yeah, that was, and by the way, nobody got in. Nobody, no white or black, no children got in to those 4 schools that were going to integrate. And you know, I guess what Wallace was thinking was that they're accusing me of discriminating, but if I don't let anybody go to school, they can't accuse me of discriminating. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we didn't get in. Friday, our lawyers went back into court, and then it was the following Monday, September 9th, that we all finally got in. I went back a few years ago to try to kind of recreate that picture to show you how different it is. And of course, Governor's Drive has been widened and a lot of things have changed. The Fifth Avenue School building is long gone. What's on that property now is the Spine and Neuro Center, or whatever. I think that's part of a bigger complex, so whatever that is there. But that's what's on that spot now where the school used to be. And the only thing that's the same now as it was in 1963 is Bragg's of Huntsville. Bragg's of Huntsville. As far as I know, they're still open, still in business,
Oh, yeah.
as far as I know.
Oh, yeah.
So last time I checked, they were still in business. Yep, that's the only thing that's the same as 1963. Now, this is the telegram that my dad sent to our lawyers on Friday. That would have been the 6th. September 6th. And basically saying they took me to school. The school was closed. The officer told him that we couldn't go in, and Dad confirmed they didn't see anybody else go in. One thing I'll say, the officers were very polite. It was nothing like Birmingham, no kind of scenes like that. They were firm, but they were polite, and there was no yelling or screaming or cursing or anything like that. But they made sure we understood that we were not getting into the school, and neither was anybody else. But like I said, so this is a little piece of history here, a copy of that telegram. And then this is Monday, September 9th, my dad and me walking into the school. When I speak to the kids, I like to tell them, just a few minutes after this picture, the stamp history was made in Alabama because my dad took me in and registered me, and that was the first time that happened in this state. That's a picture of the Huntsville Times on that day, and I'm sure you can read the headline if nothing else. State bars Negroes elsewhere, Huntsville quietly integrates. And then down below a little bit, Mobile, Birmingham, and Tuskegee, they were turned away. So the other cities that were trying to integrate were not allowed to. So we were first. We were first. Huntsville was first in the state. And by the way, I was first because since we had brought the lawsuit, we had federal marshals here to protect us. And so they staggered the integrations that morning. The 4 schools, they staggered them so that the marshals could go from school to school to school and protect us. And the marshals, for the most part, were in plain clothes so that they could mingle with the crowds. So that if any crap broke out, they wouldn't have to like come down from the steps to take care of it. They'd be right there, if anything broke out. And as far as I know, that was peaceful. There were no injuries that day, as far as I know. But like I said, I was allowed to be first of the 4 because they wanted to stagger them and because our name was on the lawsuit. And then that's just a little blow up of another article, I guess. Young Hereford incident. Okay, now this is an open letter, well, it was a press release from President Kennedy about that time. And I don't have my glasses on, but let me see if I can read it. Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. That's right. Thank you. That is better.
Next slide.
But an open letter to George Wallace, and I'm going to read this. I think it's kind of significant. I'll try to be quick. This is, again, President Kennedy's press release, okay? In the state of Alabama, however, where local authorities repeatedly stated they were prepared to carry out the court directives and maintain public peace, Governor Wallace has refused to respect either the law or the authority of local officials for his own personal and political reasons, so that he may later charge federal interference. he is desperately anxious to have the federal government intervene in a situation in which we have no desire to intervene. Okay? And then later on, the government will do whatever must be done to see that the orders of the court are implemented. But I am hopeful that Governor Wallace will enable the local officials and communities to meet their responsibilities in this regard, as they are willing to do. So this is President Kennedy telling George Wallace, I see you working, and I'm not going for it. You know, we'll do what we have to do. You know, I see you working, and letting Wallace know that I know what you're up to here. And that's the Honorable Governor George C. Wallace of the sovereign state of Alabama, standing in his office, reading the Birmingham News the morning after we integrated here in Huntsville. And if you can't read that headline, it says, Huntsville defies Wallace.
Favorite headline.
Yay.
I've often wondered why he let himself be photographed, because I mean, I'm sure he knew what the front page said, and that I have some ideas, but another time. And that's what Fifth Avenue School looked like back in the day. It's the old building. Here I am in my first grade class. I like to have fun with the youngsters and say, can you find me in this picture? So they usually don't have any trouble.
What did you think about all this? I mean, being the only little black child in that whole room.
Okay, so it was first grade, and one of the important lessons that I learned was that children are just children, and I got along with people for the most part. I got along with people just fine, and I was a good athlete. So we played recess time. We played tag. Whatever we played, I was very good. I was a really good student, straight A's, and stuff. So they couldn't really pick on me about any of that stuff. And I was just another. I was another kid, just better than they were. Anyway, so again, Facebook, I've reconnected with about a half dozen of these folks on Facebook. We have a little Fifth Avenue page, that was our school, Fifth Avenue School, and I've reconnected with several of them. One little girl, this little girl, I think her name was Jenny, but she messaged me or posted something on Facebook.